It's finally actually happening after so many flirtations, I think is the right word to use. World Superbike superstar Toprak Razgatlioglu is coming to MotoGP with Yamaha for 2026. Here's a bonus episode of the Race MotoGP podcast in which me, Matt Beer, and Simon Patterson dissect all this, while Val Horinci is on a train to Le Mans at the moment for the 24-hour car race. So we'll just have to kind of guess what his thoughts are / absorb them through our great knowledge of his brain. Simon, a couple of weeks ago, we talked about the growing prospect of Toprak getting this Yamaha deal, this Pramac Yamaha deal, and you referred to Toprak and his management, Kenan Sofoglu, as basically the boys who cried wolf when it came to MotoGP. But this time, the wolf is real. There is a wolf. He's going to be on the Yamaha.
I mean, that is the point of the story, right? That there was always a wolf at the end.
Yes, true. I forgot that.
Kind of had to happen eventually. Like it was always going to happen, and you know, anyone who thinks that I thought that it wasn't going to happen, as long as the Toprak camp were slightly willing to kind of adjust their very high initial expectations of only a factory ride, then it was going to happen. And once it became kind of clear that they had done that, I think it was inevitable that we'd end up where we are, where you know, with him finally coming to MotoGP to show us what he's all capable of.
So before we get into the story of why it's happening now, what the demands were, why it hasn't happened in the past, how we'll do all of that, who makes way for him as well is a big question. Let's talk about who Toprak actually is, because we've thrown him around this podcast. He's always kind of there in the back of our minds as the big star of the other part of the motorcycle racing world. But for a lot of our listeners who just follow MotoGP, because I know there's a kind of, some of you like follow everything as relentlessly as Simon and Val do, others are kind of MotoGP first. For the newcomers to the Razgatlioglu story, give us a little run through. What makes him so special? Why has MotoGP had eyes on him for so long?
I mean, he's arguably MotoGP's Marc Marquez, in that he
World Superbikes Marc Marquez.
Or World Superbikes Marc Marquez, sorry. In that he has taken basically bang average bikes to rather amazing results and fantastic titles. He's not done it as consistently as Mark, but he has nonetheless done it, and he's done it while being, you know, a rather exceptional showman. His background is as a professional stunt rider. His dad was basically nicknamed Mr. Wheelie in Turkey. So he comes from a family of stunt riders who's, you know, is just spectacular when you watch him pulling wheelies and stoppies into the pit box and et cetera, et cetera. He is a really good showman. And I think because of those two things, because he had talent and because he's got a bit of panache about him, he was always destined to be in MotoGP. It was always necessary, essentially, that we got to see him, what he was really capable of against the best in the world by coming here. Because, yes, he's a double World Superbike champion, but there has always been a little bit of there's always been a bit of a question mark about exactly where he sits in the pecking order. Kind of because of the way that his World Superbike championships have panned out to an extent. I mean, he switched to BMW last year, won the championship on a BMW that had never won anything before, and did an exceptional job. But there's always a little bit of an asterisk beside it that he did it on a prototype chassis, basically, or a very custom-made chassis that once they took away for this year has meant he's not able to quite match the same results against the utterly dominant Ducatis, which is something that he's not going to get rid of whenever he comes to MotoGP, is it? So there are all these questions for me about Toprak's ability, about his level, about his talent. Speak to people in the World Superbike Championship, and he is Valentino Rossi, Marc Marquez, and Mick Doohan all bundled into one, which I don't think is the case, because I don't think anyone is that level. I've genuinely seen people on Superbike saying he's going to turn up in MotoGP and win his first race, and you're just like, come on, folks, like, come on. So it's not quite that level, but there is a huge amount of hype around him from that paddock, and everyone wants to see him in MotoGP. Everyone wants to see him in the best in the world, take on the best in the world, sorry. And he's got that chance, and he's got the chance to do it on a bike that is not a Ducati, but it's going to be pretty competitive by next year.
Yeah, I do think the win the first race stuff, even if he was every bit as good as those predictions, I don't think a Pramac Yamaha is going to be winning the first race of 2026. Although, Yamaha is improving, satellite teams are no longer distant and all that. Pramac has won a championship with Jorge Martin. That is a point, though, actually, about satellite teams, because this has been a really big sticking point before. Now, a lot of people who have heard the stories of Razgatlioglu's management only wanting a factory bike and have heard the story of a disastrous Yamaha MotoGP test seeming like it might end this MotoGP Toprak storyline might be surprised if they'd kind of taken a time machine and now saw him joining MotoGP with Yamaha on a satellite bike. My short answer to why that's happened is top sports people are pragmatic and situations change, and satellite bikes are not what they once were. Yamaha is not what it once was in that sense either. But what's the longer version of that story? Why is what seemed impossible now possible?
I mean, I think that that is part of it. That he's got to be looking at the way that MotoGP has changed in the last 5 or 6 years, and thought that suddenly a satellite bike is not the worst option in the world, because some of them are pretty damn quick. And obviously Pramac is an exceptional team, which is a huge bonus. I think another factor in it, pragmatically, is the fact that his age means that, he's 28 years old right now. He's going to be increasingly overlooked because of his age. So they had to kind of make the move now whenever there was a move to be made. And I think another factor in the whole thing is that there's been a change of management in Yamaha, because it sounds like Lynn Jarvis was never particularly a Toprak fan, especially after those 2 tests at Aragon and Jerez that did not go according to plan. And there was a lot of mudslinging done in the aftermath of those about who was responsible for that from both sides. But either way, Jarvis is gone. He's been replaced by Paolo Pavisio, who, by all accounts, had an excellent relationship with Toprak whenever he was slightly more junior at Yamaha, and when Toprak was a Yamaha World Superbike champion. So it seems like Pavisio has been able to repair those bridges. We know he's allegedly been to Turkey personally to kind of sign the deal and everything. So it sounds like, just lots of factors, none of which are substantially massive, have kind of all come together to make this change at the right time.
You mentioned Turkey. We haven't mentioned what a superstar he is in his homeland as well. That's I love it when a nation that maybe hasn't had a lot of motorsport to get excited about gets a hero and really, really gets behind them. Sometimes it gets behind a hero who isn't actually going to achieve anything, but in Toprak and in Keenan, in his own career before that, Turkey's really got someone to cheer for here.
I mean, so as a bit of context for, Kenan Safoglu, Toprak's manager and 5-time World Supersport champion, there's stories about how when World Superbikes used to race at the glorious Istanbul Park, where we absolutely need to go back to now that Toprak's in MotoGP.
You would have thought that might be on the cards now.
You would think so. But there was stories, like I've heard stories from guys in the crowd, guys who were racing there, about how the grandstands would be empty for the first Superbike race, and then 75,000 people would turn up for the Supersport race, and then all go home again afterwards. Keenan was literally like David Beckham big in Turkey. Like, he was the face of Nivea skincare, the way that Beckham was in the UK. And when he retired from racing, he transitioned immediately into a seat in the Turkish Senate. Like, he's that level of superstar. And he's kind of built this clan of riders around him in the form of Toprak, the Anku brothers, who he's all kind of, a few of his own cousins who are racing in World Supersport now. He's built this group of riders around him who are very, very talented, and he's done well to promote them in some ways, but in other ways, you think that maybe Keenan looks a little bit too much in his own career and has used that as a guide for their careers at a different stage. He went to Superbikes and it didn't work, so he went immediately back to Supersport. He went to Moto2 and it didn't work, so he went immediately back to Supersport. He's maybe a little bit too conservative in his management for me. And I think if Toprak had been managed by someone who was a bit more punchy, we'd be in a slightly different position right now. But I mean, either way, he has, Keenan has an absolute superstar on his hands. This is going to be colossal in MotoGP going forwards. The size of this new fan base that's going to arrive, a very passionate fan base, let's say. there are going to be some rather massive social media battles between the new Toprak fan base and the existing Marc Marquez fan base for sure.
And you probably as well.
And me. Yeah. No, that's already happening. Don't worry about that. Yeah.
So we talked about Toprak a few weeks ago when it seemed this deal was coming to fruition. Before that, our previous chat about Toprak had been in relation to a possible Honda deal, but that obviously now hasn't gone anywhere. That was going to involve Superbikes followed by a MotoGP switch if that came off. Why did that fall apart?
We don't really know. I'd imagine part of it is because Toprak really didn't want to ride a Honda World Superbike, given the state of that project at the minute. And there's some political machinations going on around that project at the minute that make me think that maybe it was in the best interests of some people to suggest that Toprak was going to go and ride for them, even when he wasn't. You know how politics are in racing.
Yeah.
So I think maybe we can put two and two together with that one. Another part of it is obviously the fact that Jorge Martin is now a free agent. And, you know, there's only 3 Hondas available in MotoGP because he's not Southeast Asian, so he's not going to ride a Mitsu bike. Johan Zarco, they'd be just insane not to re-sign Zarco at this point.
Agreed.
So that's obviously going to happen. Mir has a contract that no one really wants to get him out of because he proved last weekend that he is still really, really fast when he doesn't fall off, and he's falling off slightly less at the minute. Which means there's one spot left, and it's going to be, you know, Luca Marini, who's doing a great job if they need him to stay, and it's going to be Jorge Martin, who is suddenly available if he's not. And with no ill will in the world towards Toprak, he's not Jorge Martin. He's not the reigning MotoGP world champion.
No, although one of our colleagues at the race, Jack Benyon, when he saw the Toprak news, was like, isn't Jorge Martin still a free agent? Why hasn't Yamaha made a play for him instead? Because that is looking from the outside. All the time you've got the reigning world champion kicking around. A lot of people have been surprised that more MotoGP teams aren't making active plays for Martin.
Ego. Jorge Martin's the reigning world champion. He's not going to sign for a satellite team. Plain and simple.
Even his old home. It took him to a championship.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think it's a simple one.
I also think as well, this confuses me a little bit, actually. I was going to say as well, Yamaha has Fabio Quartararo, so Yamaha doesn't need to go shopping for big name, big personality superstars. However, it has just signed a big name, big personality superstar from World Superbikes. This is a kind of, we'll get on in a second to who makes way for Toprak, but Toprak is also coming. He's going to Pramac, but he's coming to the Yamaha setup. This is a deal negotiated by the Yamaha boss, basically. Is this leading to Toprak and Quartararo being teammates? Because that is something I find really hard to imagine.
It's way too early to say because we need to see what he's capable of in a MotoGP bike, and that is the thing that, you know, you can't just expect him to come from World Superbikes to MotoGP as a rookie and be fast. There's going to be a learning curve because, I mean, he's never rode a prototype bike before, not since he was a Red Bull rookie, basically. And then they're completely different. They're stiff. They're less forgiving. They're less suited to the very spectacular but very superbike focused riding style that he's developed. That's all about using the front end, and you know, that's not going to work with Michelin either. So 2026 is like, it is worth reinforcing this point again. 2026 is going to be a season where success for him is going to be measured by the occasional trip to Q2. He's not coming in to win the championship in 2026. Yeah. He's not coming in to win the first race. He's not coming in to fight with Quartararo. It's just, it is so incredibly unlikely that that's going to happen. And by that measure, we're going to have to see how the year progresses to see where he ends up in 27 and beyond. The length of the contract is weird because all the initial social media posts said that it was a 2-year deal for 26 and 27. And then they all immediately got scrubbed. And now it's only a 26 deal. So we have no idea what it looks like, what the contract looks like. I think perhaps Pramac are not allowed to talk about it for some reason, because there's been no Pramac press release. There's been no Pramac social media posts. The actual Yamaha press release didn't go to the MotoGP paddock, it seems. It went to a very small mailing list. So it's all a bit covert, which makes me think that BMW have some views on it. It's also worth remembering that when he went to BMW, Yamaha didn't let him test at the end of the season, which might put a pin in Valencia this year.
Yeah. Well, which in a way that shouldn't matter if 2026 is just the rehearsal year on a type of tire that we think he won't get on with compared to, assuming the Pirelli kind of philosophy carries forward to MotoGP when they come in. This Pirelli's a massive part of the logic of getting Toprak across, isn't it?
But there's a big question mark over that because we don't know what the Pirelli prototype tire philosophy is going to be because Pirelli have never built a prototype tire.
Yeah.
So we don't actually know what way that's going to go. I'm curious to see, but it's going to be like the middle to end of next year before we understand that.
Yeah.
So
true.
There's a lot of question marks here.
There's also the fact that 2026 is effectively a learning season. It would be really crazy if it was anything other than a learning season because everything is so different. Even more so if he can't do the Valencia test. Is Toprak and other people around Toprak, by which I mean his management and maybe his fan base as well, that's got very used to seeing him succeed, is the Toprak world ready for a 2026 learning season of not many results? Or could things get fraught?
The literal death threats I'm receiving on social media today for suggesting that he's not going to win the championship next year would suggest that at least some of them are not. No.
Yeah, I'm not wishing to put an entire Toprak fan base in that group because I'm sure, well, I know for a fact there's a much, much, much more reasonable high percentage of it as well. But obviously, even the reasonable normal Toprak fans have got used to seeing their man succeed. So I can see.
Look, every fan base has its fringe elements that are a bit wild, and it's been. Have we ever had a rider join MotoGP who's got as big an existing fan base?
I would say we haven't because in the
just
days
looking
of
at population.
In the days of previous kind of big name converts from the rest of the world, social media was not as big a thing. So even if a vocal fan base was being vocal in their own grandstand or in their house, whereas now, everyone knows about it. So this is definitely unprecedented in terms of a star of this size with this level fan base coming in and being able to tell the world what they think as well.
Yeah.
The announcement of Toprak joining MotoGP did not make clear who would be making way for him. Now, Simon, your understanding is that Yamaha has the contractual ability to ditch whichever is the fourth of its riders in the championship at mid-season or something along those lines. So right now...
I think what they've got is Fabio Quartararo, who's not going anywhere, obviously. They've got Alex Rins, who I don't think is going anywhere. They've got Jack Miller, who's on a 1-year deal that expires at the end of 25 anyway.
Yeah.
And they've got Miguel Oliveira, who has a contract clause that says if he's not top Yamaha by the summer break, they can get rid of him.
Top Yamaha? Wow. That's
sorry, not top right Yamaha. If he's bottom Yamaha.
Okay,
sorry.
For you.
Yeah.
I was going to say, why did you sign that?
No, sorry.
You're not going to outscore Fabio.
Brains, yeah. I've done a lot of traveling in the last 3 weeks.
I meant to say earlier in the podcast, like, Simon, what were you doing when Toprak was announced?
I was asleep.
Yeah, and
because I just got home after 3.5 hours of sleep the previous night traveling from Aragon back to Ireland. And that's the first time I've been today is the first time I've not been at a racetrack in 23 days.
Wow. Sorry about this podcast. But, fouls on the train.
I was not happy when they announced it.
No.
Like, could they not have left it a day?
But yeah, Oliveira is vulnerable, basically.
Yeah, he is. I mean, Jack in theory is as vulnerable contractually, but Jack's having a good season. Really, really good season. And, this is a point that Val has made, and I think it's worth bringing up in his absence because he's completely right, that essentially what Yamaha are probably going to do to Miguel Oliveira is exactly what Jorge Martin is doing to Aprilia.
Yes.
Except Jorge Martin's going to get a lot more abuse for it than at Yamaha are for doing it to Miguel Oliveira. And that shows how the balance of contracts work in MotoGP because it is largely always in favor of the team. And it's a pretty sucky thing to do to Miguel because he spent most of this year injured through, for me, Aldegir's fault this time, not through any fault of his own. But I mean, just pick a rider who's responsible for Miguel Oliveira being injured. They've all done it at some point, it feels like. So it's, I don't like it. I don't like it. It's a bit messy. Jack obviously deserves to stay because he's having a great season. He is comfortably the second best Yamaha. Fabio, don't need to talk about it. Alex Rins is in a contract, but is also like just still broken. Like, he's another guy that's still carrying injuries. And I think the mistake Yamaha made with Rins was extending his deal in the first place.
Yeah, definitely. Sadly,
because and kind of putting themselves into this position.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, it's looking like it's going to be Miguel that loses out, and I don't know what the alternative. Like, there's nowhere else for him in MotoGP.
No, this is true. This is properly an end of the line situation for whoever loses out here at the moment, isn't it? Which is a real shame because, like you say, if we had a full season, there is still a chance that Oliveira would be fourth of the four Yamahas. It would be between him and Rins. Rins has shown some signs of pulling things around a little bit, but it's still so hard. Like you say, that contract should not have been extended because the evidence was not good for Rins actually being fit enough to make the most of that bike. Sadly, I say that every time. So every time I mention Rins, because I really want him to be amazing on a Yamaha because so much of his career has been so good, and he was waiting for a bike like this. Oliveira gone.
The good thing will be that whoever loses out here is going to get offered a substantial amount of money by multiple MotoGP or multiple World Superbike teams.
Yeah.
Because the World Superbike rider market at the minute is wide open. And we suspect that Ducati has a big money seat available to be Nicola Bulega's teammate. We know that BMW has a massive budget to pay someone to replace Toprak, because the amount of money that they were reportedly offering Toprak would have been like low end of factory MotoGP contracts and the biggest World Superbike contract ever by like 50%. And there's a load of money at Honda, that original Toprak deal. Honda, again, for slightly political reasons, from what I understand, are desperate to get a big name there as well. And Jack Miller has been linked to both Ducati and Honda, but I don't think Jack will only leave MotoGP when Jack is forced to.
Yeah.
He's not leaving MotoGP whenever he doesn't have to. No, exactly. So I don't know who's going to end up where in Superbikes. I don't think they're going to get the massive influx of MotoGP talent that they think they're going to.
No, there just aren't enough people heading for the exit to make that possible.
Not this year.
It's this. I do want to talk about what happens in Superbikes longer term as a result of this as well, because on the same day that Toprak was announced as coming to MotoGP with Yamaha, Bulega got his new Ducati Superbike deal, but with a massive MotoGP hint in that. He'll be testing next year for Ducati's MotoGP team, which you could go, okay, he knows Pirelli's, makes sense, but also that surely lines Bulega up for a potential MotoGP future somewhere in the Ducati ranks. He looked fantastic when he was part of Valentino Rossi's stable very early on, and then things went wrong for him in Moto3 and Moto2. But what he's doing in Superbikes now is superb. So he would be a good fit back in MotoGP. Do you see that as a kind of foregone conclusion based on how he was announced? Or
nothing's a foregone conclusion, and I see the logic behind having him as a test rider with Pirelli experience. I think that makes sense. But I mean, there's fairly strong hints there, aren't there? And it makes sense. You got to think that people like maybe Morbidelli won't still be in a Ducati in 27, and that there will be space within kind of MotoGP ranks. And if he's won another Superbike title by then and looks really, really strong, then why wouldn't you move him over? Makes complete sense.
While you were at the Isle of Man on the middle podcast we did, where we talked about a few of these rider market things that were brewing and have now exploded, I suggested, this is fun. I'm sort of playing you off against each other because there's one with just Val and one with just you on this topic. I suggested that VR46 lineup is a problem for Ducati because Franco Morbidelli is just kind of, he's not like Yamaha final year level bad by any means, but he's sort of flatlined. This is not 2020 Morbidelli anymore. And Fabio Di Giannantonio is not having a good season at all on what should be the best bike on the grid. So, I see both Frankie and Didier as longer term question marks. And Val was very much like, nah, that's fine. They're doing fine for what that team kind of needs. And I was like, no. But this is why I see the Bulega thing as being such a MotoGP leaning announcement yesterday, partly because Ducati, obviously, to me at least, you can let me know what you think in a second, has some riders in its lineup who it can't go confidently, yeah, we definitely want them for 27, 28 and beyond. And also, Ducati needn't have said, and he'll be testing the MotoGP bike on Pirellis in the announcement yesterday could have just been, here's his big new World Superbike contracts. To throw in the reference, just open the door too publicly, too obviously. He could have just turned up doing some private testing next year, and then it would have been like a little aside that we could get excited about then. But saying it outright in June 2025, to me was just such a, yeah, we might put him in MotoGP in 27. But yeah, go on. VR46, am I right?
It makes sense. Well, VR46 have a factory GP25 within their ranks, which basically promotes them to Pramac status, right? With Pramac going to Yamaha, they are now Pramac status. Yamaha or Ducati will not accept long term that the team remains Valentino Rossi's plaything if it's also to be their new Pramac.
Yeah.
Because look at the factory riders that have come through the Ducati team in recent years, and look how many of them have been rookies to Pramac and then into the factory team. That has been their system. And I don't think they're going to love a world where they have to lose out on riders because Valentino Rossi wants to keep his mates in a MotoGP ride. And that is a harsh way of putting it, but also it's the reality. So I don't think that this is I don't think it's going to last that way forever. I think there will have to be at some point a change in how Ducati do things with that team, or with another team, in which case Rossi's team loses out on some of their status and their technical support. But also, I don't think that Gresini is ready for that. So,
I think Gresini is not ready to take on the ex-Pramac
I don't
role
think
effectively.
they want to. I don't think they want it. I think they like being the proper independents.
Yeah, because right now the Gresini lineup is what the Pramac lineup always used to be: experienced guy who's well, I was going to say experienced, dependable guy. Alex Marquez has only been the dependable guy for the last 6 months. Really, that wasn't the case last year. Just experienced, and the kind of the young rising star in the Ducati ranks in Fermin Aldeguer. So yeah, it's a bit of a mismatch compared to that. Like you say, that Pramac conveyor belt of, what was it, Iannone, Petrucci, Miller, Bagnaia. Martin was on exactly the same path before Ducati got crowded. That system has worked really well for Ducati.
And they're not, like Pramac or Gresini aren't doing the role at the minute because they don't have anyone that can develop a bike.
Yeah.
Not through lack of talent, but because Gresini don't want to pay for a GP25.
Yeah.
So they're losing out on that traditional part of the role.
Well, Gresini gets to enjoy having a sorted bike that can finish second in every race.
Yeah, win some races.
Season. Yeah. What about the wider impact on the profile of World Superbikes of all this movement? If Toprak is definitely going and Bulega follows him, we've made such a big deal of what a huge star Toprak is. That's a loss for Superbikes, isn't it?
I don't know why people in the Superbike paddock are so happy to see him leave. I think they're losing a big, big draw. And this could be really, really bad for, like, Superbike is a championship that does not need to be damaging itself, does not need to be losing superstar riders at the minute, given its kind of place in the world. And yeah, this cannot be good for Superbikes. It cannot be good for crowd numbers at certain events going forward. It's just, it doesn't feel like a very good step for the future of the championship. Doesn't feel like it's very PR friendly for them losing out to him. I mean, it's just one less reason for Superbikes to be a bit special. One less reason to buy a ticket to go to Donington, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to be disparaging about Superbikes because I've also got a lot of respect for what goes on there and the riders who are there and the quality of racing as well. I'd never thought it did Superbikes any favors when Alvaro Bautista was winning a run of championships, because he never looked It's fine to have someone who maybe hasn't had the MotoGP career they deserve go to World Superbikes and get what they deserve there and look great. But I felt, and it was kind of influenced by Ducati's domination, Bautista looked a little bit too good in World Superbikes, having been someone who was fine in MotoGP, but never remotely like someone who was going to win a title or should be really fighting for a top team place. So that comes across as like a really blunt way of saying Superbikes is easy for washed up MotoGP stars to go and win in. I don't think that's the case, but I think what Bautista did made it look like that could be the case at a glance from a distance if you weren't following it in detail. Whereas a proper Superbike superstar homegrown coming through and being amazing like Toprak is actually great for the championship to make its own heroes rather than inherit a not quite a hero from somewhere else.
Thing of MotoGP the thing of Superbikes recently has been this kind of head to head of the older MotoGP stars versus the homegrown talent. It's been the Jonathan Reys versus the Bautistas, the Topraks versus the Bulegas. It's been a great narrative.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's, maybe with a few more Superbike or a few more MotoGP guys going over, like we've talked about, it's just going to kind of dilute that a little bit, because I don't know if there's any, like, with no ill will in the world towards the rest of the Superbike Championship, if you take out Toprak right now and take out Bulega, who's kind of 50-50 Superbike MotoGP, it's hard to see another star in the making who's a Superbike talent.
Yeah.
Because, like, who's then your next block of riders in the championship? It's Bautista, Petrucci, Ian Aroni, Remy Gardner, Domi Agater.
Yeah, almost
and
GP scene.
Andrea Locatelli. They're all MotoGP guys.
Yeah.
They're all, yeah.
It has actually been a very long time now since a World Superbike megastar jumped over to MotoGP. It's hard to compare eras. MotoGP now is so different to MotoGP even 10 years ago, let alone 20. Is it too blunt to say that we haven't seen a World Superbike star translate well to MotoGP in a long time? Ben Spies was a race winner, but that never really developed into what everyone hoped it might. James Toseland started out with that amazing qualifying performance in Qatar, and then things didn't really go where you wanted them to from there. Jonathan Ray's little cameos as a stand-in never really got rewarded. I thought he was pretty decent for jumping straight on the bike. Injuries played a big part for Spies and Toseland, but I don't know, what's your take on kind of the recent history of Superbike stars coming across? Has it ever worked?
I don't think it's even, you don't even have to look at recent. I don't think a Superbike rider has made a substantial impression on a MotoGP title battle ever.
No, I mean, it's statistically true, isn't it?
There's been guys who've come and won races and who've, absolutely written themselves into the history books with Crutchlow's wins as the first Brit since Sheen, with Bayless's wildcard victory, but not guys who've actually made a substantial impact at the sharp end of the championship. It hasn't happened. I mean, Edwards never won a race despite coming as a double world champion. Spies had an incredible rookie season in Superbikes where he won the championship and came to MotoGP and won a single race, and then, got injured while already having been kind of demoted to a satellite bike and, not being at the sharp end.
Yeah, for Spies, the injury kind of finished things off, but it was
already on. There was a trajectory at the time. Yeah, Toseland never had an impact really.
Yeah,
never won a race. So I don't see a path for Toprak to follow here that you can look at and say, oh well, these guys have done this before and this is how it works. It's not that easy. And it really kind of hints to, how different these bikes are, I think.
Yeah. Why do you think MotoGP didn't give Jonathan Rea a proper chance in the end?
Oh, no. MotoGP gave Jonathan Rea a chance. Jonathan Rea didn't take it. 100%. And like Jonathan's career, Jonathan's flirtations with MotoGP were very, very similar to Toprak's up until yesterday, where Toprak actually signed, where lots of deals were made and none of them were ever quite good enough, and he didn't really want to take the risk for something that he didn't consider worthwhile. And Jonathan, ironically, was offered a Pramac ride.
Yeah. Yeah.
He was also offered a Yamaha ride. Actually, just to complete that circle,
When
at
was that?
Forward.
Oh, Forward. Wow.
And that bike everyone thought was going to be, a weird CRT thing, and it turned out to be exceptional.
Yeah.
Remember, that's the machine that Loris Baz was sticking on front rows. And Jonathan turned those both down. So I think that feeds back to what we said at the very, very start about Toprak has had to change his demands a little bit to make this happen.
Yeah.
Because you don't just graduate to a factory bike.
No. Although at least in the mid-2020s, doing what he's doing, I do get why, if it was only kind of Pramac as it was then or Forward as it was then, Ray wasn't interested, because even when those satellite teams were doing well in the mid-2010s, it still felt like a bit of a novelty. It still didn't necessarily feel sustainable. It still didn't feel like the manufacturer was necessarily behind that. It was almost a bit of luck until Ducati really took Pramac seriously.
But you have to remember that the other World Superbike graduate of Jonathan's era took a gamble on the worst supported satellite team in the championship and turned it into a factory ride, a 10-year career, 3 wins, and a very, very, very healthy bank balance at the end of it in the form of Cal Crutchlow.
Yes, true.
No, he went to Tech 3 whenever they got Yamaha's year-old hand-me-downs. And he turned it into he turned it into a MotoGP career as opposed to a Superbike career. So you have to take the risk. And Jonathan, I think, never wanted to take the risk. And Toprak never wanted to take the risk until now.
As much as I think in this podcast we might have come across a little bit skeptical about some elements of the chances of this working, I'm also massively excited to see how it works. I watch a bit of Superbikes. I listen to you and Val talk about Superbikes quite a bit. I'm well aware of the storylines, but to actually see this character come into a championship I follow religiously and see how it goes, either way, if it doesn't live up to what his fan base and he hope, I think that could end up being quite a spectacular and fiery story. It's not going to be a quiet fizzling out, is it? If it does go well, then what an awesome thing that would be for a nearly 30-year-old Superbike convert to come and light up MotoGP. I'm skeptical about that happening to the degree his fans would hope for, but I'd also absolutely love to be wrong about that, because what a cool story. At a time MotoGP needs it, I think, as well.
Toprak on the MotoGP grid at Istanbul Park is going to be Zarco on the grid at Le Mans levels of insanity.
More than that, I would have thought. But yeah, definitely. What a prospect. Right, I think that will do for now. Simon, I might make you write some things in a minute rather than going straight back to bed, but I'll try and give you a little bit of a chill time before Mugello. Thank you, listeners, for dropping back on for this one. We've still got the original bonus podcast about the TT coming up late this week as well. We've got 2015 Brno Race Members Club on Friday. We don't intend to be back in your ears until after Mugello now, but we didn't intend to be doing this podcast either. So let's see what happens.